Good evening and welcome to our study tonight. Let's start within the news with one of our categories, New World Order. American media silent as world leaders plan new global pacts out this week. Despite a blackout by the American media, the Summit for a New Global Financial Pact brought more than 50 world leaders to Paris for a meeting which is sure to have far-reaching consequences for the world. And although the summit received little or no reporting from the American media, go figure, it was the latest efforts to reset the international financial system as part of the continued push toward a 2030 agenda and net zero goals. The summit was attended by U.S. President Joe Biden, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The summit was organized with support from the Open Society Foundation, which is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation, among others, global elites. One of the stated goals of the summit was now watch and listen, especially with an eye and an ear to revelation. One of their goals was to transform the entire international financial system by adapting the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the World Bank to modern challenges. One of the suggestions for generating the trillions of dollars needed to transform the financial system, and the world along with it, by the way, is to tax the biggest polluters, particularly fossil fuel companies, because of their historic responsibility for climate chaos. There's also been discussions on taxing ships transporting goods. 13 political leaders attended the summit, again, including Macron, Biden, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Sunak from Britain, Brazilian President da Silva. The politicians wrote that they are, quote, urgently working to fight poverty and inequalities. Don't believe it. They said this: climate change will generate larger and more frequent disasters and disproportionately affect the poorest, most vulnerable populations around the world. They also said these challenges cross borders and pose existential threats and risks to societies and economies. Yeah, right. What it is an elite takeover of the finances of humanity. It is their agenda. Another one says this. It talks about how the media hasn't told us anything about it. They have just kind of ignored the fact that this is happening. And this is big stuff because they're looking to rearrange all of the global finances on the planet. And you know, for it to go unreported in American media should tell you a little bit about the American media. Let me give you a little bit more as we continue to go on. Fractured America. Millions of Americans are relocating just prior to the chaos that is coming. Summer's moving season for millions of Americans normally, and many will end up relocating to an entirely different state this year. Political and ideological considerations are motivating many Americans to search for greener pastures. Never happened before. Something has gone horribly wrong in this country. All around us, our society is literally coming apart at the seams. It's become exceedingly clear that great chaos is coming. An article that was recently posted by PBS was entitled "Conservatives Move to Red States and Liberals Move to Blue as the Country Grows More Polarized." It's really happening. Hundreds of thousands of people have been leaving the state of California in recent years in search for a better life elsewhere. More than 500,000 people, 500,000 people, left California altogether, watch this, between April 2021 and July 2022. Many relocated in Texas. In fact, approximately 300 Californians moved to the state of Texas on a daily basis in 2021. 300 per day. But just like so many other blue states, it's been transformed into a cesspool of crime, drugs, homelessness, and violence. Once upon a time, crime was primarily limited to the bad areas, but that's no longer true. Let me give you an example. In one of the wealthiest areas of San Francisco, a gang of children wielding baseball bats this week have been ruthlessly assaulting nannies and young mothers in order to steal their phones. You heard me, right? Of course, San Francisco is definitely not alone. Over the 4th of July weekend, at least 150 Americans were gunned down all over the country. Homelessness is also a problem that started to spiral completely out of control in blue states. Homelessness in Los Angeles skyrocketed over the last year, increasing by 12% in LA County, 10% in the city, leaving more than 75,000 people living on the streets of that county. And then there's the national drug crisis. More Americans are addicted to legal and or illegal drugs than ever before. And overdose deaths just keeping setting a new record all-time high year after year. If you are going to relocate, I would advise for you to do it now. If you want to see what the enemy's doing, he has an agenda for America. And America is going pell-mell right with that agenda. We've never seen this happen in America, and it's happening at a fast pace. Things may seem unstable now, but the truth is, they're only going to get crazier from here. I wish I didn't have to tell you that, but that's exactly what's happening. Let me give you a little bit of good news from Israel. This is the arrival of the biblical red heifer in Israel. Could bring millions of visitors. Hundreds of visitors flocked to Shiloh in Samaria's Benjamin region on Thursday to welcome a biblical, pure red heifer. The 22-month-old cow, which was brought to Israel from the United States, found a new home at the ancient Shiloh heritage site, where the biblical tabernacle once stood. In the coming months, 2 or more heifers will be transported to the town, and a center will open there dedicated to researching the phenomenon of a red heifer, a pure red heifer. The heifers will be kept in a fenced-off area, and visitors will not be able to touch the animals. The mysterious red heifer, or the para aduma in Hebrew, is first mentioned in the book of Numbers, when God instructs Moses and Aaron to take a perfectly red, unblemished cow. That means not one blemish, not one white hair, not one other colored hair, all red, which upon no yoke was laid. The animal is subsequently slaughtered, and its ashes are used in a purification ritual. Now, why is that so important? Well, Benjamin Regional Council head Israeli Gans called the cow's arrival a historic moment. The red heifer arrived as part of the council's temple conference, which started on Wednesday with a temple-era dinner. The conference continued on Thursday with lectures at Tel Shiloh, the center of Jewish life before the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. Among the topics, speakers discussed the offering of the Passover sacrifice in modern times, the traditional grape varieties of the region, and urban and logistical planning in the vision of future Jerusalem. The vision of a future Jerusalem, to many prophetic scholars, includes the ashes of the red heifer and the rebuilt third temple. You don't build a temple unless you have the ashes of the red heifer, because it purifies everything. It's extremely important. The prophecies came true. The Jews are back in Israel since 1948. Now they need to build a temple. But it's like buying a really nice car. If you don't have the key, you're not going anywhere. The red heifer is the key to making the temple work like it's supposed to work. A team of rabbis from the Temple Institute flew out of the U.S. to inspect the calves last year, and afterward approved that they were kosher and right and blemish-free red heifers, and then they were transported to Israel last fall. So are we closer to building the third temple? Yes. You need a red heifer. Now Israel has one. First time in 2,000 years. There's also some not so good news for Israel. Hezbollah is gearing up for a showdown with Israel. Hezbollah is intensifying preparations for an imminent confrontation with Israel. Let me give you a summation of what's going on. They have over 30 observation posts in the northern border, the Golan. And they've been setting up tents in an area that the UN said Israel controlled. Israel got it from Syria in the Israeli-Syrian war. And now Hezbollah is moving in on it. And they're amassing troops, 3,000 of them, on the Lebanese border. So everyone's feeling the mounting tension. It's drawn the attention even of the United States, which is attempting to mediate between Israel and Lebanon to prevent a full-out and a full-on scale war. Hezbollah has in the past year constructed more than 29 military posts also along the border. They were under the guise of green without borders, a Green New Deal kind of thing, but they had nothing to do with climate change. They are observation posts and military posts that are right on the border, ready to strike Israel. Hezbollah has given a green light to the Palestinian terrorist groups in Lebanon to fire a barrage of rockets at Israel during Passover in April. And so we see that they've already started something, and now they're continuing, and it looks like it's going to happen. Now, most of the wars in Israel only last for about 6 days to a week, but it looks like Hezbollah is gearing up. I haven't told you a lot about economy lately, so I want to. The Biden administration is starting to tell us that we're out of inflation, everything's good. And they're giving us numbers to try to prove that. Well, they're lying to you. And the mainstream media is lying to you. They're not telling you the truth about inflation. Inflation is going down, is what they're saying. Isn't that wonderful? When many less educated Americans hear this news, they will think that prices are going down. But that's not true at all. If the rate of inflation was still calculated the way they did it back in 1980, it would still be well into double digits. So we should be thankful that prices have moderated a bit for now. But anyone that believes that inflation is under control is being delusional. Month after month, the cost of living just keeps becoming more oppressive for average Americans. Americans are also opting for cheaper brands and budget stores to combat inflation, in a blow to manufacturing giants such as Procter & Gamble, whose profits are going to the basement, and a boost to the likes of Dollar General, whose profits are soaring. More than 60% of American population is living paycheck to paycheck. It's being projected that back to school spending will decline for the first time in 19 years. Now it takes more than a middle-class income to even rent a glorified dungeon in New York City. A tiny disguised space, which has been turned into a $2,300 a month apartment, has been dubbed as nothing more than a glorified dungeon. The unusual apartment in central Harlem could be found at the back of a lobby, hidden behind a laundry room, and they're renting it for $2,300 a month. I can't understand how anyone can possibly believe that the cost of living is under control. It is not. Let me give you another one that's come out so that we can see what's going on. The mainstream media is definitely not telling you the truth about inflation. They are continuing to say this scenario that everything is fine. Another article, I won't read it all for you, talks about how the Biden administration has been pushing the media to be positive about inflation. Now, why would they do that? Let me also tell you this, the feds are not going to get us out of this one. They're thinking of hiking up interest rates again. That will be monstrous. It'll be terrible. But we're watching Americans being duped. Unfortunately, many Americans, and I'm being kind, are not smart enough to understand that we are being lied to. Let me give you a little bit about moral decay. Where children are unsafe. In Taiwan, there's been a recent outbreak of adults drugging children, the BBC News tells us. One incident took place in a preschool where the staff are accused of sedating children by giving them phenobarbital and benzodiazepines via addictive cough syrups. Parents noticed their children going through withdrawal and they reported the incident. So the principal and 5 teachers were arrested and are now free on bail. Can you imagine? They're drugging kids so they don't have to watch them. Listen, we are watching the most selfish planet ever all over the globe. People only thinking about themselves. Let me give you a little bit more on this moral decay. Madness. Parents now can be arrested for not paying for their child's sex transition. In the United Kingdom, they're setting the pace for this. It's going to extremes now, making it abuse not to abuse a child. Government there is demanding parents when their children say they're transgender. Parents who refuse to use the alternative pronouns for their children or refuse to pay for their transitioning could be criminally prosecuted. Let me remind you that a child's frontal cortex, the ones that for decision making, does not mature until they're 25 years old. So they're not capable of making correct decisions. And now a child, if their parent does not want to pay for their sex change, can have their parent arrested and thrown in jail. Those transforming treatments would include the administration of chemicals to sterilize a child for life and even surgical bodily mutilations. To potentially prosecute a parent for refusing to use an adopted pronoun of their child is chilling, and it's wrong. We wonder how far we've come. How did we get this far? Just secular England? Nope. A public report explains a new bill in California would add affirming the sexual transition of a child to the state's code for parental responsibility and child welfare. What does that mean? It means if your child wants to identify as an opposite sex and you go against them, or if they want some type of surgery and you won't pay for it, you're going to be accused of abusing your child. your child will be taken away from you and put in an adoption home. Lawmakers in the state have adopted AB 957. The bill originally demanded courts to consider whether a child's parents were gender affirming in custody cases. The report said, in essence, a boy could report his parents to the local school's Gay Straight Alliance, their club, or other LGBTQ plus organizations, who could then report the boy's parents for child abuse. If you're a Christian living in California, I'm praying for you. I'm also believing and hoping that you would get out of that state. It's a beautiful state. I've been there many times. My wife was born there. But listen, it has gone terribly wrong in the state of California. Let me give you this one also. Tell you how America is really in bad shape. This report came out. Lonely America. More Americans are living alone than ever before. Once upon a time, it was fairly rare to find someone that was living by themselves in America. But now that's completely changed. Americans are getting married later in life. Couples are having fewer children. Divorce is rampant. And millions of broken families litter our national landscape. As a result, the traditional family, the nuclear family unit in the United States, is weaker than it's ever been before. Another tool of the enemy. He knows if you pull down the family, you pull down a country. Without strong families, no society is going to thrive for long. Single-person households reached almost 30% in the United States this year. Nearly 30% of American households comprise a single person. It is a record high. Never happened before. 30% of households. They're called solitaries. They made up only 8% of all households in 1940. That doubled to 18% in 1970. And now it tripled to an estimated 30% by 2023. Americans are marrying later, if at all, is one of the reasons. The nation is aging, another reason. The national birth rate is falling, another reason. People are living longer, or they were until the pandemic arrived. But more than anything, perhaps, the rise of single-person households is about women entering the workforce and achieving economic self-sufficiency. Living alone is much more common in large cities. Singles now make up more than 45% of the households, listen, in Atlanta, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Denver, according to a paper by the British historian Keith Snell. And the other problem is we value ourselves much more highly than we used to. In other words, we have become exceedingly selfish. According to Bella DePaula, author of the upcoming book, Single at Heart, living alone can be a dream come true for some. You get to curate your own life. You decide when to go to sleep, when to get up, what and when to eat, what and when to listen to or to watch for entertainment, how to warm or cool your place will be all by yourself. But how empty are you going to feel after you have nobody to share your life with in year after year? In addition to training our young people to be selfish, we've also trained them to think of children as burdens that should be avoided if you really want to enjoy life. Indy, at 25 years old, and her husband, Geraldo Urbi, 34, are intentionally child-free and consider themselves DINKs. It's an acronym which stands for Dual Income, No Kids. I'm sure that might be fun for a while, but they'll never get to see their kids grow up. They will never have grandchildren. There'll never be any family reunions when they get older, and there won't be anyone there to take care of them when they near the end of their lives. Living to please ourselves may seem gratifying for a while, but in the end, it leads to great emptiness. On the other hand, loving others often involves great sacrifice, but in the end, it leads to great fulfillment. Now let me give you something that's kind of prophetic. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised it's come out this late because I talked about this in 2017. So it's on your planet Earth, and you can see these trails across the United States. Let me tell you what's going on. 3 eclipses will combine to create a giant Aleph over America. And Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew Bible. So the paths of 3 eclipses will combine to form a giant Aleph over America. And hardly anyone knows about this. Aleph, again, is the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet. By the way, the second letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Beit. We get our word alphabet from it. In the 21st chapter of Luke, Jesus warned us that there will be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars in the last days. We should be watching for such things. An enormous X that is in the process of being marked across the United States will be happening very, very soon. Again, I preached about this way back in 2017. Those are the two total solar eclipses that make an X over the United States. The first one is August 21st, 2017, the Great American Eclipse. I literally went to many states in the United States preaching this. They made headlines all over the world. It was the very first solar eclipse since 1918 that was able to be seen all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. In the U.S., the path of the eclipse started in Oregon and it continued all the way across the United States, continental United States, and it exited the country in South Carolina. But what makes that eclipse unlike any other is the fact that it will combine with another historic eclipse coming in 2024 to form a giant X across America. Man, I don't want to tell you this, but it's almost like America's being X'd out. Listen to it. On April 8th, 2024, another great American eclipse will make headlines all over the planet. Nobody's talking about it now, but they will. The path of that eclipse will cross over the states of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. If you plot the paths of the 2017 eclipse and the 2024 eclipse on the same map as I have right here, you will clearly see they combine to form a massive X right over the heartland of the continental United States. If you closely examine this area on a map, you'll see that it falls right in the middle of the New Madrid fault line, one of the massive fault lines running straight through middle America that is overdue for erupting. Someday there's going to be an absolutely catastrophic earthquake around the New Madrid fault zone. Last time it happened, it diverted the Mississippi River. It will be so massive, this next one, that it will permanently alter the geography of the United States, and you won't want to be anywhere around when that quake finally arrives. On October 14th, 2023, this October, an annual solar eclipse will also cross the United States from Oregon to Texas. If you overlay the path of that annual solar eclipse on top of the path of the Great American Eclipse of 2017 and the Great American Eclipse of 2024, you'll see again that those three eclipses form an Aleph. There it is, first letter of the Hebrew Bible. By the way, that's God's signature. That's an Aleph. Aleph in Hebrew has a numerical value of 1. Aleph is also representative of God in the Hebrew language and the oneness of God, the one true God. So what does it all mean? Well, I'm not totally sure, but I'm going to tell you a couple other facts. Let me share something with you. If you do a Google search, which I've done, for when the new moon in Jerusalem will be on October 23rd, you'll discover that it'll be on October 14th. That's the exact day when the annual solar eclipse will cross our country from Oregon to Texas. If you do another Google search for when the new moon in Jerusalem will be in April 2024, you'll discover that it will be on April 8th. And that's the exact day when the Great American Eclipse crosses America and completes the Aleph. By the way, April 8th also happens to be the first day of the first month of the Hebrew calendar. In other words, a brand new biblical year begins on that date. I find it hard to believe that that's just a coincidence. Something's happening. God's showing us something through the signs, especially for America and Israel. Full moons, an Aleph, 3 eclipses. God's telling us something. What it is, I'm not really sure, but I'm telling you something's going to come. Let me give you a little bit of weird news. Atlanta man attempts to rob a nail salon and gets ignored by everyone. You got to love this one. An unidentified subject with his hand bag as if he were holding a weapon stormed into the nail first salon last Monday, demanding money from the store owner and the patrons. Although the man shouted, "Everyone get down, give me all your money," surveillance video shows he was ignored by both customers and employees. You got to love this. That is a picture. He's telling them to get down on the floor. The salon owner even decided it was okay to answer the phone during the attempted robbery, while the customer casually stood up to go outside, though the suspect snatched her phone as she walked outside. Eventually, the humiliation appeared to be too much for the subject, who left the salon in a silver-colored sedan, according to law enforcement. You gotta love it. He was snubbed. They wouldn't comply. We need to see more of that in America. That's in the news for tonight. I want to continue to update you on In the News. Those are current news items on the week. And no, I've stayed away from some of the politically activated news that's happening this week, such as the 2 IRS agents that are now testifying before Congress concerning Hunter Biden. All that stuff is a rigmarole that's going back and forth and over, and our media has run it on a loop, and sooner or later we'll find out the facts. But right now, I'm telling you what, it is just a quagmire. Everything's going on, and there's obviously 2 different types of laws in America. One for those in the government, and then the other one for you and I. So we'll make sure we talk about that in the future. But trust me, you're being inundated with it right now, and we'll wait until all the dust settles, and I'll tell you.